So here's a question. What does a game about a dystopian, futuristic, let's say dysphoria, magical, terraforming, terrain shape-shifting, area control game, and game about making craft brews all have in common? Well, the answer is that it's not what's outside that matters, but how you organize the bits on the inside. Hey, this is Andrew from Gameosity, and if you're a board game collector, or just a board game aficionado, or if you just own a few, very quickly you, if you're like me, probably are going to start encountering the problem of component organization. Basically, you get a game, it's awesome, and it has a lot of bits, and you need a smart way of storing those bits between plays, or maybe getting them to the table a little bit faster. Well, what are the options? Well, if you're like me, then you probably start with something like this. Enough zip-top bags that the FBI has taken an interest in your browsing habits, or maybe enough Plano boxes that Amazon.com thinks that you're an angler. But there are definitely better ways. For some games, for a growing number of games in fact, there are these aftermarket box insert organizers. And there are a lot of companies that do a really good job of putting these together. What's interesting though is there are organizers that are works of art, incredibly intricate, beautiful. There are organizers that are just bare bones, basically just boxes with little compartments. And then there's this really neat sort of middle ground of vacuum plastic organizers from a company called Trayz. And so today we're going to be looking at a couple of different inserts from Trayz for a couple of my favorite games. And what's neat about these, just right off the bat, is that unlike so many of the incredibly high-end box inserts, products from Trayz are, well, they're not going to double the price of your favorite board game, because the materials used and the manufacturing process that they go through means that they can pump out some fairly good quality inserts at a very reasonable price. Now, let's take a look at some specifics, and we'll talk about some cost-benefit and some advantages and drawbacks. So the first one of the Trayz that I want to look at is for Euphoria, one of my favorite of the many fantastic games from Stonemaier, but the review is another video. This is one of the oldest, as far as I know, of Trayz inserts, and so its design philosophy is good, but it's a little different than what they kind of do now, which you'll see once we get through the other ones. So if we pop open the box here, you'll see underneath the rules in the board, this is the main body of the insert. And of course, importantly is the fact that there is a plastic cover that covers the entirety of the box, and that means that because the board is designed to snug it down, this whole thing can be stored vertically, which is how I like to store my games, without the pieces falling all over the place. Once you take this plastic piece off, you have, obviously, player components that are separated by color. There's space for everything, and that's one of the things that makes this work so well. These component trays are particularly good. You divide up, this is the Kickstarter premium edition of the game. Your edition might have slightly different bits, but no matter what bits you have, this organizer has these component trays that can just be pulled out wholesale and just placed on the game table, so that you've got them in two spots and players don't have to be reaching across each other to get to their components. Up here, obviously, you have your dice and your player bits. Here you have other components that all have their own little spot to go in. Everywhere that there's something that looks like it would be kind of tough to pick up, like these cards or these tiles, the design of the insert is such that you press down on it and it pops up, and that makes it very, very easy to pick up. And underneath here are storage areas for even more cards. If you had them all sleeved, there'd be somewhere for them to go. This is an extremely functional, extremely good insert, and it does the job very well of getting the game to the table very quickly. It makes putting things away very easy. Everything has its own place, and importantly, it stores vertically nicely, which is something that I consider kind of a must for if you're going to bother reorganizing the internal components of a game. You need to be able to store it however works for your collection, and for me and for many of us, vertical is the best way. So for Euphoria, the game Trayz insert has worked out really well. Next up, Tree in a Box. Terra Mystica is a big game. It's a lot of fun. Tons of individual player components and also bits that go on the game board. And so let's see what Game Trayz has to offer in this regard. I'm not kidding when I say that this is a tree in a box. There is a tremendous amount of component at work here, and as it is somewhat surprising that this is what the inside of the box looks like, even with an aftermarket organizer in place, but you'll see the value of it in a moment. Once you get all of these like player bags out of the way with all of these individual player components, you get down to the Game Trayz inserts themselves. Just like Euphoria, you have a couple of different component organizers that are designed to come out and sit on the table, and you can see these are slightly newer, and so they are designed with lids individually. So there is an even greater safety in having these out on the table. You pop the individual lid off, the component tray sits on the table in the playing area, and everybody can reach for either their magic tokens or the workers or their money, what have you. The other thing that it stores inside, very nice, neat, and thin, are these tokens here. Again, another individual cover for this part of the organizer, and just like in certain parts of the Euphoria organizer, you have that whole divot thing that it does to make it easier to pick up components that would otherwise be really tough to get your fingers into. These little bits too, everything fits nice and neat. Next up, Brewcrafters from Greater Than Games. I know it says Dice hate me, but they're Greater Than Games now. This worker placement microbrew crafting game from Ben Rossett is a really great one, but again, I'll save the game review for another video. I can't help it, it's just my nature. But this is one of the games that needed an insert the most. It's got, I think, exactly 3 billion little components, and every single one of them needed kind of a place to live, and it was either find a really good aftermarket insert solution or just all these tiny little bags. It didn't work. Nothing worked. So it was really, really cool when I saw that Game Trayz had an insert for this game. Now, I will say that this is the game that, while I felt like it needs the insert the most, and I feel like it benefits from the insert the most, it also has a couple of drawbacks that we'll talk about kind of as we go through the review of the product. You'll see what I mean. And it's a your mileage may vary kind of thing. Some of these things will bug you like they bug me, some of them won't. Alright, so first things first, and this will either bug the hell out of you or it won't. It bothers me a little bit, but I feel like the trade-off is worth it. The box doesn't quite close anymore, and that's due to the displacement of the boards and the insert and all the components. Would the box close neater if everything was just bagged up? Yes, but once you get a look inside, you'll see why I don't think that's actually preferable, and the trade-off is worth it. So open her up, and here's where that I'm talking about, that sort of like component thickness comes from. There are all these player boards, and one of my other criticisms of this particular insert is that I know it sounds crazy, but at first we didn't actually know how to put things away using it. And I mean, now that we know, it's no big deal, but at first we kind of had to like muscle it in, and I'll explain what I mean in a second. First, you've got the different buildings, and again, this is one of the new inserts, and so it's designed with its own individual top. What's really cool about this one, first of all, this particular insert is showing off the felt, the matte finish that it comes in. And the other thing is that it too has the rockers that make components easier to take out. And it even has, it's kind of tough to see in the video, it has embossed on the bottom of each area what it is that would be best to go into that spot, you know, how it's fit together. And so I found that really helpful. So you can just pop the top off, slap this on the table, and there you go. These are the ingredient and other component organizers, and this was part of the problem that I had with the insert. I couldn't quite figure out how to put it all away. And it turns out that you just kind of have to like muscle these into place. And it doesn't necessarily feel intuitive, but once you're comfortable doing it, it's not that big a deal. They have the embossed bottoms that tell you what to put there. They have the individual tops, and there are two of these inserts, and so you can just pop them open, put one on one side of the table, one on the other, and that's actually something I really love about this and the Terra Mystica insert, that you can account for a bunch of different players not needing to reach across each other. I really appreciate that. And so these are great. And underneath here, there's the best thing about this insert, and then there's my biggest criticism of this insert. The best thing about this insert is this tray right here. This thing is so super necessary. Do you see all of these little cardboard tokens? Do you see how each one of them is different, and they each would be exactly too small to justify a zip top bag, or too tiny to justify, you know, individual boxes or even compartments inside of a plano box or something like that? This insert, this thing, is perfect. And it adds a tremendous amount of sanity to the setup of this game, because each of these needs to be kept separate and they all need to be thought about individually, and putting them away and taking them out now, so much easier than without this. My criticism, though, is the fact that after all of that, I still have, you know, things that don't have a home. And so that's one of the drawbacks to the Game Trayz inserts. They are definitely designed to make setting up and tearing down much easier, but they're not about finding a spot for every single thing in your game. I know, sometimes that feels a little crazy. So the last thing we wanted to talk about as far as the Game Trayz products today are these little tabletop organizers that they sell. These aren't particularly connected to any game, but you can get them to put out on your table to pour components into, and I mean, I suppose you could get them and fill them and store them in a game box if you wanted to. They each have a lid that you can get. They come in a variety of colors, and the lids are very snug. I mean, I have one with some fairly heavy beads that don't come out when I flip them around. They're designed so that you can stack them in case that's valuable for storing them, and some are even set up so that they're divided, so that you can have multiple component types inside of the same organizer bit. They're really actually pretty handy. So here's where I stand on Game Trayz. The bottom line is that I think that it's great that they're available. They are not the top tier luxe game insert organizers. And that's great, because sometimes I pay $30 for a game, and I don't then want to pay $40 for an insert and organizer. These are tremendously functional for the most part, except for like every now and again a very tiny either manufacturing or whatever quirk that makes it not 100% effective, but 90% effective. And where they work, they're fantastic. I think that they're certainly attractive enough to keep on the table. For the most part, they fit very nicely into the boxes with one or two little caveats here and there. But more than anything, I feel like they're fantastic for their value. I think they're fantastic for the trade-off that you get for, do I want to spend all of my time meticulously bagging and organizing my components, or do I want to just get to the game nice and quick and have functional, attractive components that I can put out? Does every game need an insert? Well, actually, I would argue that yes, every game needs an insert, but that's only because I really love very nicely organized components, and Trayz is actually a pretty good solution for that. There are going to be games that I want to like spoil and get deluxe, incredibly complex inserts that have, some of them have mechanical parts and some of them have gears and clockwork and all that stuff, but sometimes I just don't want to have to figure out how I'm going to organize 1,000 tiny little beer tokens, and Trayz does provide a really excellent solution for those of us who are looking for something that works, that looks decent, and that isn't going to blow the budget. I'm Andrew from Gameosity. We'll see you next game.
Hey there! Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, give us a like and hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next game.